blast tonight. Thank you guys all for coming. I'm really excited about this. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Everyone involved has really been great to work with. This place is beautiful. We got to do an after party next time. Word. All right, so I'm going to take you through a package of information that I feel is the most fundamental information for you to know as a producer. I didn't necessarily invent all of it. There is a lot of stuff that I invented, but basically the objective here is to convey to you what the most fundamental, most important information is for you as a producer and to provide a complete picture. Because it's so easy to just feel like you're awash in options and that you don't know what to do when, and there's this infinity of software over here and an infinity of music genres over there. And most producers, when they're in that state, they all suffer from pretty much the same problem. But because it seems like an infinity of problems, it's very easy to overlook how simple it actually is. And most people feel that their problem of not being able to complete a large enough body of work quickly, creatively, and professionally enough to get the results that they want, most people will feel that that problem will be solved by buying more gear or buying more software or by learning YouTube tutorials about compression all day or whatever. But that's really not the case. The problem is much, much more fundamental and much more simple than that. It's a psychological, organizational, and workflow related problem. And the sooner you can realize that and start to structure your learning with the most fundamental skills first and then gradually progressing to going down the technical rabbit hole of all the different directions that you can take it, then you're going to be able to finish music, get fans, and get to where you're going. I want you to listen very carefully to what I have to say, especially in the first section, because we're going to cover the kind of life skills that you need to have as a producer. Learning to make and keep your own deadlines, learning to get the two halves of your brain working in harmony, learning what basically the most fundamental problems are to tackle. And one of the most powerful things that you can know is that many amazing producers made their entire career with a pencil, an eraser, and scissors. Okay, if you've ever written an email, you know how to do that already. And it just comes down to finding sounds that sound good together and putting them in an order that makes people feel stuff. Right? And when you talk to, there's a million people who will offer you free advice, especially on the internet, but a lot of that is just, it's really easy to create a technical tutorial and put it online and get props for it and feel like, I'm making an impact and I'm helping people, but it's really not easy to put together a tutorial about arrangement or about workflow or anything that requires a larger attention span. And frankly, there's just not like an arrangement plugin that you can get better at than people and jaw off about on the internet and be the cool guy on the message board. So people don't talk about it, right? But the fundamental skills are arrangement and workflow. And you can learn those two skills with a pencil, an eraser, and scissors. I mean, look at artists like Burial. Any of you guys listen to Burial? Yeah, when he first got signed, it was this big mystery, like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Turns out he's a 17-year-old kid who still lived with his mom, and he was writing all of the first album, especially by lifting little bits and boops from video game DVDs and acapellas on the internet and field recordings of fog sounds and like his neighbor through the wall and stuff. And he wasn't even using a sequencer. He was just using the multi-track mode in SoundForge, visually lining things up and just cut, copy, paste, and writing this incredibly mature, profound music that made people wonder, like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Kid, pencil, eraser, and scissors, living with his mom, no proper studio setup, nothing, And even guys like Danger Mouse, like that Grey album is made entirely in Acid Pro, right? I mean, when I first got my first record deal, I was cutting up little bits and pieces from my record collection and sounds that I got from a mic using Acid Pro. And through this weird chain of coincidences, I bought a record that was broken, and I was hanging out with someone who knew someone at the record label. I called them up and was like, yo, I bought this record, it's broken, can you mail me another one? And they were like, oh, why are you hanging out with my friend? Do you make music? I told them about this online producer community I was part of. Next time I log in, new instant message from the A&R guy, and he's like, yeah, I want to sign this track, this track, this track, and this track. And they were like my second, third, fourth, and fifth tracks I ever wrote. So I was like, oh, well then, okay. So I go to this meeting, there's all these A&R guys there, and there are all these other artists, and they sign us all up for album deals. And after that, we're having beers, and I'm drinking like a Coke or something, because I was a kid. And they're like, oh, well, what do you use? We go around the table, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm using, Motu and Pro Tools and Logic and, hardware and this and that and the other thing. And then it comes to be my turn, and I'm like, yeah, I use a pencil, eraser, and scissors and some records. And they were all scandalized, right? I was like, well, you liked them enough to assign me. And they were like, listen, you need to learn Logic, you need to learn digital audio, you need to learn VST, you need to learn how to program a sampler, you need to know how a compressor is, you need to know all these things. P.S., you owe us an album, where is it? And I'm just like, oh God, really? Like, really? So I go home and I'm pulling out my hair trying to learn this stuff. I had to bring guys from the Guitar Center over and like bribe them with weed to come show me how to set up my sound card and everything. And it's a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I was trying to do every step of the process at the same time in a completely unstructured way, and I was just overthinking everything. And it was hell. It took me a year to finish this record. And, granted the production was a little bit better than when I was just cutting up sounds with a pencil and eraser and scissors, but I'd lost the workflow, I'd lost the speed, I'd lost the joy of it and the fun of it. And everything started sounding very paint by numbers, and I felt that the emotion wasn't being as directly conveyed as those tunes that I finished in a day or two with a pencil, eraser, and scissors. So I'm thinking, like, what did I lose? What did I lose? Like, where did I go wrong? Why is it that because I know more, my songs are sucking more? Like, that should not be the case. And that experience was really, really valuable to me because now I can tell you how to avoid it. So basically, the first thing I learned, and very, very important thing to learn, I learned this by collaborating with other people too. And if you don't collaborate with other producers, get your head out of the sand. It's the thing to do. It's way more fun. You don't want to waste each other's time, so you're a lot more likely to finish things. You're a lot less likely to spend 3 hours tweaking a bass patch. And you get the songs done a lot better, and you can kind of fill in the blanks in each other's skill set, and just being part of a social kind of community of musicians really helps you to feel like you're late. And we're going to get into why you need to feel like you're late in a bit later. But through collaborating with other producers, I learned that one of the biggest mistakes I was making was I was trying to do every step of the process all at the same time. I was trying to learn while I was trying to set up new soft synths, while I was trying to do sound design, while I was trying to mix, while I was trying to write, while I was trying to create, while I was trying to analyze. And my brain was going 50 million directions at once and nowhere at the same time, right? So basically, over the years, I've learned that it was change of sound over time, and what those changes make the listener feel, that is the essence of music. That's where you should be focused. And it's the changes of sound over time that direct the listener's attention and emotions through your composition, right? So if you've been listening to the same song again and again and again for 50, 60, 80, 100 hours in a row, you've memorized every single modulation of every single parameter, every single change is static in your mind. So your mind, your attention, is not going to the changes in the song, it's going to things that are no longer relevant, like whichever VST plugin is shiniest, or whichever channel you have open in front of you, or whatever the last sound you added to the composition is. And you've lost the plot, right? It takes a real master, a guy like Tipper, to be able to spend more than 80 to 100 hours on a track and not have it come out this overworked, fragmented mess, right? So I found that basically, it's much, much better to finish a song in either one session or a couple sessions that are really, really close to each other. And I like to imagine what I call the 20-hour guillotine. And there's this guillotine hanging above my studio desk and a clock, and it's ticking. And if I don't finish that song in 20 hours, plop, gut it for parts, put them in the library, move on with your life. And in my experience, a lot of the best songs, a lot of my favorite songs, the songs that have been the biggest hits for me, come together in like 3-4 hours, right? And then there are other songs that I feel like the idea is good, but the reality isn't good, and I'm just trying to force reality to conform to my idea and like wedge the parts in with a shoehorn. And yeah, technically they might be fine, but they don't have that magic, and people don't resonate with them nearly as much as the songs that I finish quickly. So I like to imagine this 20-hour guillotine that's going to fall. At 20 hours, gut it for parts, put them in the library, move on with your life. So if that's the case, then basically you need to take every single thing that is not writing and arranging and externalize it. So that leaves you with two kinds of sessions. I call these sessions daytime and nighttime sessions because I was, I had other engagements in the daytime. I wasn't doing full-time music at that time. But you could think of them also as preparatory and writing sessions, if you like. So basically, in the nighttime sessions, not necessarily at night, but basically any time that you have maybe 3 hours or less, you're not likely to finish a song, so don't start one. That's when you do things like watch YouTube tutorials, learn a new soft synth, program sampler multis, program racks for your library, fix the wiring in your studio, practice drumming or playing the piano, etc., 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 right? Dig through your sample CDs, because maintaining a library is so important. We'll get into this later. A stack of sample CDs in a folder called samples is not a library. Okay, a bunch of presets that are in the native VST plugin format in your VSTs is not a library. So library maintenance is extremely important. And then your daytime sessions, right? That's where you're only composing, writing, and arranging, right? That's all you do. Anything that is not that, nighttime sessions. Now, I don't know if any of you like to smoke weed, but I'm guessing that probably at least a couple of you do. And I'm going to tell you one thing that I had to learn the hard way about 6 billion times. If you sit down to write a song and your first move is to roll up a joint, you are not finishing a song that day. And even if you do, it's probably going to suck. You end up like going off in a million different directions at once and maxing your processor with all these aborted ideas, and you end up this big tangled web of 6 million channels and tons of automation, and then you can't like copy and paste and move things around, and then it's just this fragmented mess, okay? Don't smoke weed when you're writing. Don't smoke weed when you're writing. If you're nerding out doing sound design, making samples, working on your library, yeah, some of that stuff gets boring. So yeah, maybe smoke a joint or have a beer or something, whatever, to get you through it. But if you're writing, don't smoke weed. So the daytime sessions, the reason why I call them the daytime sessions is what I do when I'm having a daytime session. I wake up as early as possible because that daytime session may go till 4 in the morning. You never know, right? And also, you can only stay up late working on music a few nights a week before you're burned out, whereas you can wake up early and write music every day forever, right? So, and sometimes the daytime sessions go very long, but wake up as early as possible. Do what you got to do to get your head together, and I'm going to tell you a bit of things or a few different things that I do that help me. But do whatever you got to do to get your head together. Pound coffee. Take the modem jack out of your computer and unplug the modem from the wall. Then take your battery out of your cell phone and put it at the opposite end of your house. Okay, you do not need to have that information. You really, really don't. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I'll be working on a song and I'll be rendering, or there'll be some bar filling up or something, and I'll go, oh, hey, waiting around, let's multitask, go check the old email. I go there's one of my friends, and she's like, I can't believe that motherfucker did that to me again. Now I'm stuck in the suburbs, and what am I going to do? And then you got to go get your friend in the suburbs and bring him back and earful of how much your boyfriend sucks. And then, it's a couple hours later, and all of your clarity and focus is gone. And you sit down, and you're like, right, where was I? not finishing a song that day. Okay, it doesn't just take time to answer the phone or check an email. It takes mental clarity and mental focus. And I really cannot stress enough, like if you have 20 hours to finish a song, you can't be thinking. You can't be thinking about anything else. You have to have that clear, empty mind and just go next action, next action, next action, done. You know, just plow through it without thinking about it. Because you don't write music by thinking, okay? You write music by doing. Now, this brings me to another very important area. A lot of us are crippled by these hesitations. We're crippled by overthinking, and that too will detract from your focus, right? A lot of people have this fear of being wrong that is very, very important to have in the rest of your life if you're at work or, you know, piloting a nuclear submarine or performing brain surgery or, you know, carrying out diplomatic relations with Libya. Yes, you should definitely be afraid of being wrong. But you're just not going to start World War III at your sequencer. You're just not, right? There's no right or wrong creatively. The only mistake that you can make is to hesitate. Because when you're in the creative realm, even mistakes are useful. And an expert is defined as someone who has made every mistake that there is to make within a limited domain. Okay? If you're going to become an expert, you need to get your hands dirty and make those mistakes and not pussyfoot around and, you know, render MP3s and send them to your friends on the internet and ask them what to do next, right? And I mean, especially when you're starting, as soon as you print an MP3, that's how that song stays, okay? I'm not joking. Like, don't print MP3s until you're done. Maybe right before mixdowns, but don't print MP3s until you're done. But you need to stay in the unhesitating state of just action and action and action. So it really all comes down to the cultivation of instincts. And in order to tap into your instincts, you're going to have to do some unlearning as much as you have to do learning. Because really, you know, if pencil, eraser, and scissors is all it takes to write a good tune, to write the kinds of tunes that people build their whole careers on with pencil, eraser, and scissors, you actually don't need that much technical knowledge. You just need to get out of your own way, stop overthinking things, and learn a workflow, learn arrangement, right? So it really all comes down to the cultivation of instincts. Now, many other things come down to cultivation of instincts, notably kendo. Because if you are in a sword fight, if you stop to recall the wise words of Yoda, you're fucked. You're eviscerated, headless, dead, you're done. The tides can turn on a dime, right? So in kendo, they describe the ideal mental state of a sword fighter in combat as either wunyen or munyen, depending on which language you speak. And that loosely translates into English as no decision, but that doesn't really capture the nuance of what's intended there at all. It's much more like no deliberation or no hesitation. And your job as a sword fighter is to practice and practice and practice these forms in your nighttime sessions when you're not on the clock, so that it all becomes like a muscle memory. And then it's said that when you're in the state of wunyen, your mind is as clear as a mirror and reacts appropriately just as quickly. Now, artists have another name for this state. They call it creative flow, or being in the zone, right? Or being on fire, right? I'm sure if any of you have finished a song before, or even really had a good session, you'll know what I'm talking about. And there's this feeling like you don't have to think about what you're doing at all, and you're just like, man, this is awesome. This tune is writing itself. Like, everything's coming together. This is like a magic day, you know, and your eyes will light up, and you look at your friend if you're producing with a friend, and you'd be like, yes, this is it. This is great, right? And that's the mental state that gets those amazing hit songs done in 4 hours. But as soon as you stop to fuck around with a bass patch or dig through your sample libraries or whatever, you're going outside of that creative kind of outpouring, unhesitating, action, 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 done state of being in the creative flow, in the zone, in wunyen, and you're going into the left brain kind of analytical, picking apart, kind of state, and that immediately takes you out of the zone. And it's very, very important, especially at early stages of the game, to always be focused on what things put you into the zone, into Wunyan, into the creative flow, and what things take you out of that zone, right? And I think probably the most guaranteed to take you out of that zone is feeling like you've done something wrong, right? And when you feel like you've done something wrong, it's only natural to want to know what went wrong, why it went wrong, how you can fix it, etc. Those are all analytical questions. Those are all left brain questions. Those questions cut you off from your instincts and bring a studio session to a grinding halt, right? So it's very, very important to resolve all of those questions in your nighttime sessions, so that you have a library full of tools that you know are going to work perfectly. And they're just 1 or 2 clicks away, all perfectly organized by sound type, not by VST plugin. And by what tasks you use them for, not by how you made them, right? And then when they're all at your fingertips, you can just go boom, 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 put the Lego pieces where they go, off you go, right? So it's very, very important to train your brain to not be jumping back and forth over that left brain, right brain divide. And that's actually the mark neurologically of creative people. If you're a neurologist and you have a cadaver of an artist and you cut their brain open, even if you don't know that they're an artist, you can tell that they're a creative person by performing a brain autopsy. And the reason why you can tell is because the organ that connects the two halves of the brain, the left and right, the corpus callosum, that organ is up to 200 times larger, stronger, and more developed in creative people than it is in people who live in the left brain. And we're very strongly encouraged to live in the left brain only in our society. We like to know, yes, A, therefore B, therefore C, therefore action, and then you can write a little form and hand it to your boss, and it's all very mechanical. But that's very strongly where we're encouraged to stay. And the creative mind state is a lot less analytical. It's got a lot less like voices looming over your shoulder. It's a lot more playful, a lot more childlike, likes to think associatively, likes to think outside of the box, likes to make mistakes, get its hands dirty, all that stuff. And that's really not very encouraged in our society. So it's very, very important to get these two halves of the brain working together if you're going to be able to cut off the flow of thoughts that is interfering with your connection with your instincts musically, right? So one of the best things that you can do for that is to keep a written record of your thoughts. And here's a statistic that I actually only found out a couple months ago that blew my mind, okay? The single greatest known predictor of success in life is not socioeconomic status, it's not education, it's not race, it's not anything like that. It's written goal setting with a pen and paper. The single greatest predictor of success in life. And if you study the habits of any high-level creative people, which I do strongly encourage you to do, all the like William Burroughses and Leonardo da Vinci's and Pablo Picasso's of the world, they all keep a journal, almost invariably. And it's really, really incredible because basically by having a journal, I write every morning, first thing in the morning, because that's when your left brain is weak, right? It's kind of on vacation while you're dreaming, and that's why you're like, oh yeah, totally normal that I have lobster claws and a jetpack. That's totally real, right? Your left brain's not really, it's kind of taking a nap while your right brain gets to do its thing while you're dreaming. And when you wake up, you can remember your dreams for a bit until you go send that first email or talk to your roommate or whatever, and then poof, all those dreams are gone. So that's your time to strike. And basically, what I do is I write 2 pages longhand with a pen and paper in a graph paper moleskin. And I do strongly encourage you to buy a graph paper moleskin to do this. I do the journal keeping from the front and then a few different other kind of exercises and note taking from the back. But having that book is really, really important. And don't just have like a duotang or something. Like have a book that looks nice, that feels nice, that costs some money so you'll feel like an idiot if you waste it. And, it's really like very appealing, it's good to make it appealing and make it really, like I got a whole shelf of like 10, 20 of these things all full, it's great. But anyway, I wake up in the morning and I write 2 pages longhand, stream of consciousness, anything that comes to mind. Could be a dream I had, could be bitching about one of my friends who owes me money, could be planning my day, could be poetry, could be whatever, right? Sometimes stupid pictures. Sometimes I just write the same word over and over again if I just want it over with. The point is to do it every day, right? And the thing is, unless you're, a creative writer who writes with pen and paper, which I don't think that many creative writers do. I mean, everybody uses a computer these days. It's a format that's like outside of your normal creative format, and it's a format where mistakes are safe. If the point is to fill the pages with words as quickly as possible and move on with your day, then there's no mistake. The only mistake you can make is hesitation, which is exactly what you're trying to train your brain to do, right? So you get all these thoughts out, and you'd be surprised how much kind of recurring thoughts are cluttering up your focus all the time. And once you have gotten them out, when that recurring thought happens again, maybe it was like some nasty thing one of your grandparents said to you about your musical aspirations, or, maybe whatever, right? As soon as you have that thought, you're ruminating about an ex, a lot of people ruminate. But once you have that thought out, the next time you have that thought, you're like, okay, well, I had that thought. It has a physical place in space and time, and if there's nothing new to add, why would I keep thinking about this? And they naturally go away, right? And it's important to make them go away, because your brain is like a garden, right? The neurological connections, your brain's constantly rewiring itself, very, very plastic, right? And the water is thoughts. When you fire a pattern, that pattern gets more resources and the connections become stronger and more efficient. It doesn't matter what the emotional valence of that thought is. It just matters whether you're thinking about it or not. So if you're sitting around thinking about something you hate all the time, it doesn't matter that you hate it. You're still tattooing that shit into your mind. It's not good. You've got to let it go and move on. And when you write things down, especially every day when you're like really groggy and just trying to do it quick, you'd be surprised what comes out. And after a few weeks, the clarity is amazing. And then another benefit of this process is that you're planting the seeds of future insights, right? When I started doing this, it made it so my subconscious mind was kind of constantly churning away on my various musical processes and goals and whatnot. So I'd maybe be on the subway and I'd be like, oh, that's a totally great way to route my bases. I'll do that when I get home. Or, you see a weird looking tree and, a phrase comes into your mind and then a theme for a song happens. Or, my favorite producers would come visit me in my dreams and be like, dude, that tune you're working on, it's that shaker sound. It doesn't fit. You got to get rid of it. Goodbye. And then I wake up and be like, oh, hey, he was right. Awesome, right? So it makes it so you're actively programming your brain, unlearning, and then planting the seeds of all these future insights. It's just like basically mental garden tending, right? And if you do that, your progress will be radically accelerated. Okay, so I would recommend that you buy Moleskine or some other nice notebook and write in the morning 2 pages every day, right? And I mean every week. I've taught thousands of people now, like all over the world, Australia, Asia. We translated workshops into Chinese. There's a Chinese version of ill.Methodology coming, all over America and Canada. And every week or two, I get someone who's like, hey man, listen, I just want to thank you. I got a record deal now. I'm playing with all my favorite artists, and I'm so stoked. And the thing that you told me that made it happen was writing with a pen and paper in the morning every day. And once I started doing that, all the pieces start coming together. And literally, pretty much every single time that one of my students comes back and says, hey, I made it, I got there, check out my new release, like, here's my tour, it's always the ones you write in the morning, okay? So, you don't have to do it, but you also don't have to be a musician either, right? So the other thing that these people tell me that they did that made a big, big difference is making some kind of formal commitment to their creative development, right? And if you talk to musicians, anyone who's a successful musician has had some kind of moment where either they, decided or maybe did a written contract with themselves with their goals in it. That really works. Or, maybe it was gradually or whatever, but they just knew that from that point onwards, they had to do music, come what may. And I went to school to be the graphic designer. I actually did the graphics for my album, but I thought I was going to be a graphic designer, right? And I would procrastinate and do music, and then it kind of ate my life. But at the end of graphic design school, I get this internship. You know, I'd started to tour a bit at that point, and I had that record out that took me forever to finish, and it hooked me up with Bass Nectar, that record, and but you know, I'd had a taste of what things what the future had in store, but things weren't really moving yet. I wasn't really making that much money from it. Wasn't really making that many fans. But I'd just done my first coast-to-coast tour, and I'd come home, and I was working at this. My school got me a placement at a fucking wedding magazine, and I'm doing page layouts at this wedding magazine. I'm like, man, I went to art school for like 10 years for this, and I had this horrible fat old lady boss. And she would either like yell at me when I was being too creative. She'd be like, no, we're going with a more traditional look this issue, Dylan. And I found her, like, these people got married underwater, and they had like underwater priests and all these amazing photos. And she'd be like, no, we're going for a more traditional look this issue, Dylan. And you know, she'd be like, yo, can we use more frilly fonts and clip art, please? Like, just maddening. And then when I was doing well, she would hit on me. And she had these horrible, soft old lady lips that would leave these wet spots on my cheeks that would like haunt my fucking nightmares, right? And it was like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I'm like, man, I went through all these years of art school for this. Like, is this really what I have to look forward to as a graphic designer? And there was this graveyard near my house that I used to go think, because all the parks were full of crackheads trying to sell me bikes and drugs, right? So I'm going around, I'm walking around, I'm thinking, like, looking at all these broken, illegible tombstones, and like thinking about my life. And I was reading some Nietzsche at that point. Nietzsche has this really excellent thought exercise that I encourage you all to do right now. And it's called eternal recurrence. So imagine for a moment that rather than going to heaven or hell or being reincarnated when you die, imagine that once you die, you're instead forced to watch your life play like a movie again and again and again. How would you feel about your decisions then? Right? Don't think about being accountable to some outside force. Think about being accountable to yourself. You know, how do you feel about your decisions according to your values? And it's a really, really important thought exercise to do because, yeah, you know, it's just a thought exercise, but at the same time, you know, you are forced to relive your life through your own memories forever. And that, you know, when you take your memories with you longer than any atom in your body. Like, even your bones are replaced every 7 years. Even the brain cells that are more or less permanent, you're constantly swapping matter with your environment through eating, through drinking, going to the bathroom, breathing, etc. And there's no atom in your body that is permanent, right? But your memories, like, you're going to have memories that are always there. I mean, even people with Alzheimer's still remember how to play the piano, you know? But you're going to have these memories forever. And it's really like, it's important to respect the permanence of that and really live a life that is free of regret. Now, if you talk to old people, and I'd strongly encourage you to have friends who are old people and friends who are 5 and stuff, because if you just hang out with people who are your own age and like your same kind of music, you're just not going to think any interesting thoughts. You know, it's an input-output system. You know, you need to have diversity of inputs if you want to have diverse output, right? So I strongly encourage you to talk to some old people. And one of the best things you can ever ask an old person is, what do they regret? These older people, they have a very thin wall between thought and speech because they just don't give a shit. They're old. Like, what if you're young? What do you care? You know, they'll tell it like it is. And if you ask them about what they regret, you'll find that in the vast majority of cases, unless you've like accidentally run over your 4-year-old child or something, the vast majority of cases, people regret not the mistakes that they made. Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. It's inevitable. It's part of being alive. But rather the things that they didn't do. That's the shit that eats your soul. Not ever talking to that person you were secretly in love with. Not ever going to Paris in the springtime. Not spending enough time with your kids. Not writing the great American novel. Not finishing that album. Not making that documentary. Once it's too late, that shit will eat your soul. And most people spend their lives focusing on whatever's most urgent. Right? And the thing is, a lot of the most important things are not that urgent. You're not going to get an email that's like,
bro, you're wasting your life. Get on it. Where's the album? No, the email is like, oh shit, fix the car. Or where's my rent? You know, those are the things that are popping up in front of you all the time, and you'll just backburner music and backburner music and backburner music until you've had that moment, and you can connect to the urgency and the importance of these goals that you have. I mean, you don't want to end up, buying overpriced sports cars and breaking up your marriage and chasing young girls when you're older. You don't. It's depressing. That's why people do that shit. Right? It starts to slowly drive you mad. So it's really important to kind of recognize that sooner rather than later, especially if you're young. I see a lot of you are young. It's really easy to think that, oh yeah, I'll totally conquer the world later. Let's play PlayStation, And the sooner you can do that, especially if you put that agreement with yourself into writing, the sooner you're going to start hustling, right? And it's really like there's two halves of motivation, right? This is, again, goes back to the unlearning that I was telling you about. There's two types of motivation. They correspond to the left and right brain. On the one hand, there's extrinsic motivation, which is where you do things to gain rewards and avoid punishments, right? The carrot and the stick. It's how we're managed in the work environment, typical work environment. And then, on the other hand, there's intrinsic motivation, which is where you do things for their own sake, or because you think they're beautiful, or they're fun, or you've internalized the idea that you're the kind of person who does those things, right? Now, this guy, Ed Deci, at the University of Rochester did some very interesting studies with these two types of motivation and creativity in children. And I was thrilled when I read them because it explained an awful lot to me, especially why I went to art school and became a musician. So they had three different experimental groups in this study. In the first group, they had their homeroom teacher go, hey kids, here's some art supplies, paint if you want, right? In the second group, they had their homeroom teacher say, hey kids, want some candy? Paint me a picture. And the kids were just producing the worst, horrible eye rape, like give me candy, rah, they burned the paintings and never spoke to them again. And then in the third group, they had someone that they love and respect come up to the kids and say, oh, what wonderful paintings you're doing. What lovely artists you are. Highlighting the intrinsic value of the work that they were doing and labeling the kids as artists. And those were the kids that really threw themselves in their work, were still painting after the bell went, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And so we now know scientifically that extrinsic motivation is creative poison. And that's why people like me go to art school and become musicians. And that's why I'm sure you know many people who have gone to audio engineering school and then went and became an accountant or whatever, right? That's why. So you need to take control of your motivation and make it intrinsic motivation and not extrinsic motivation. If you're constantly counting the hours and trying to judge your work at the end of the day, no, your work is not yours to judge. You just do it every day. Eventually good shit will happen. But it's not yours to judge. Your opinions on your own work are generally irrelevant, and I'll get into that a bit later. But you need to take control of your motivation. So once you've had this moment, especially if you've put it in writing, you're now internalizing your motivation so that you can move beyond counting the hours and wondering if the shit's going to pay off, right? Which you frankly have to do if you're going to get anywhere. And then when you tell people around you and tell your friends, right, once you have created that label, that identity for yourself, if you go to a house party, someone's like, hey, what do you do? If your answer is not, I'm a musician, motherfucker, you've got some work to do. You still have to have that moment, right? But once you let people know, then you take advantage of the social nature of your being to make that labeling and make that motivation stick. Because once those words come out of your mouth in a social situation, when your homies come over to your house, they're not going to be like, hey, bro, let's smoke weed and watch Entourage. They'll be like, yo, where's the new tunes? How's the album coming? When's your next tour? You got a show coming up? What's up? And you're going to feel like an idiot if you don't have answers to those questions, right? So you're taking advantage of the natural social nature of your being to tie your own sense of self-worth to how much you're hustling creatively. And that is so, so, so important. And that's why most of the most successful musicians have all had some kind of variation of that moment. So do whatever you got to do. Go sneak into an abandoned building or go to a graveyard or, write a contract in the blood of your dead hamster or whatever. And just make it real, make it mean something to you, and tell your friends. And the sooner you can do that, the sooner the pieces are going to start falling into place, right? And then, the writing in the morning, especially once you've done that, like I strongly encourage you to write a contract with yourself and put it somewhere conspicuous around your house. That's one of the best things you can do, especially across from your toilet or on the back of a door that you open every day. Because then not only you, but your friends are going to see it every day and be like, how much progress am I making on this, And like I said before, the single greatest predictor of success in life is long-term written goal setting with a pen and paper. A lot of this stuff just doesn't work as well with a keyboard. I don't know why exactly. I think it's something to do with the muscles, memory, or something. But that's the single greatest predictor of success. So the more you can focus on that and the more you can actually do it with a pen and paper, the better. The sooner all these pieces are going to start falling into place. And then the writing in the morning and keeping a journal is like constantly checking in on your progress in that way. So you want to break your large ambiguous sub-goal of I've always wanted to do music or your large ambiguous goal of I've always wanted to do music into sub-goals with actions and deadlines, right? Because nobody just wakes up and is musician, right? Like that's not an action. You need to break it down into actions and deadlines. And a sample contract could be like, I'm a musician at heart, and if I don't have a go at this, I'm going to regret it on my deathbed, and it'll be horrible, so I have to do this. So I want to have an album done in a year, I want to have a website in 2 years, and I want to have 1,000 fans and be making a living in 3 years, right? So that means that I have to have, my library prepped by day X. I have to have 3 or 4 songs written by day Y. I need to pick the best ones and mix them down by day Z. I need to have graphics done by this day. I need to have, hosting done by this day. I need to have my Bandcamp account by this day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Break it down into actions and deadlines. And if you have that on your wall somewhere that you have to see it every day and you're checking in with a pen and paper, you'll get there in no time.